Committee. First order of business is consideration of minutes from December 15, 2022. Move for approval. Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Any comments, additions, deletions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 2 is the ZREZ 1222-00142 West Charleston Business Center.
Move for approval.
Mr. Pryor, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sass. Any discussion or any questions from Ms. Nguyen or Mr. Armstrong or Mr. Evans or anybody? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. That concludes our planning Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. This will start our Finance Committee meeting. First item, resolutions. 2A, Women's History Month resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of items 1 and 2.
One.
We don't have one.
We don't have one.
All right, well, I move
I
for
didn't
approval
distribute
of
those minutes
items
yet.
number 2. Item number 2.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Number 3, consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Moody. Any questions, discussions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Item 4, boards and commissions.
Chairman, I'd like to ask Madam Clerk, do we have anywhere we have to separate out just one per item?
No, sir, there's one per item.
Move for
Second.
Moody correcting this, all right.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Moody.
A through D.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. 5, greenbelt items.
This is a presentation, okay.
5A, TST update, greenbelt program. Presentation.
Chairman, members of council, for the opportunity to provide you this quarterly update. November was your last update, so there's just some minor changes that have occurred since then that I'll run through quickly. We're still at 194 total projects, as no new projects have been approved. Our acreage amounts are very close. They've changed by about an acre or two just because of a recent survey that clarified acreage on one parcel. Our total funds awarded also remain unchanged, just under $135 million, as well as the average cost per acre, $5,357. This slide does show our most substantial change in the report, and this is due to the Ingleside Weber Park project that you all approved last November. They completed their property appraisal, and despite that value increasing nearly 3 times from what they originally estimated, the owner is still committed to donating the difference, which is a value of over $33 million. So our total match provided, our fee simple, and our urban pots all increased substantially. This slide remains unchanged as well. We've got over 11,500 total acres in public access at a cost of $148.9 million. Minority lands funding stayed at $57.5 million and comprises 3,703 acres. No changes to our goals update since November, but I did just want to remind everyone that we have surpassed our original goal of protecting over 40,000 acres, which means that over 30% of all land in the county does have some type of protection. We're still working on the individual goals of rural lands, urban lands, and corridors. We've had 6 projects closed since November. Those are Church Flats Battery Expansion A in Hollywood, Keith Kinlaw Scenic Buffer, Little Britain Jenny King Easement, Peters Point Vergat Easement, and Botany Bay Heritage Preserve Expansion, all on Edisto Island, as well as Horace Park on Folly Beach. And then we still have 10 active projects that are moving towards closing, 3 of those being the most recently approved. No change in our funds available, but we are working through the winter cycle, so that will be reduced here once it reaches council in April. No change to our current annual urban allocations. That's what each individual municipality has on hand to spend right now. Folly Beach, and the urban unincorporated are still in the negative and will remain so for several years. And then the right column shows the projected lifetime balance for each municipality and the urban unincorporated area. All of those are in the positive. And as I mentioned, we did just complete a FY23 winter application cycle back on January 27th. We completed, that was the deadline for submission. Those projects are working their way through the GAB subcommittee right now, and we expect those to come to this committee in April. Our next cycle, FY24 summer, opens on June 5th. It'll close on July 28th. And then looking ahead to next year, FY24 winter application cycle will run from October 27th to January 26th. Any questions?
Any questions, council? Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Pryor?
I move for approval on items 5B through E.
Second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Pryor, seconded by Mr. Moody, approve 5B through E. Are any questions about any of those items? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
On 5A, if we could back up for a minute, were you going to review some of the Greenbelt recommendations for changes, or is that just for our information review? Or?
I have a presentation to prepared if you'd like me to run through that.
Okay.
I'd like to see it.
Okay. And that was 5B, right? The comprehensive Greenbelt Plan 5-year review.
5-year
Yeah,
review.
well, we've approved it, but yeah, I'd like to see it.
Yes, sir. All right, so the original comprehensive Greenbelt Plan was adopted in 2006, and Ordinance 1343 says that the plan should be reviewed and revised every 5 years. We just completed that with the Greenbelt Advisory Board, and I'll provide you a summary of the discussions and the recommendations that they undertook over the last year. Feel free to stop me on any individual item if you have questions. I've broken these up into 3 different sections. First are recommendations that can be implemented by council just by the directive that you just voted on. Those are, first and foremost, the GAB did not recommend to bond any future revenues of Greenbelt funds to continue pay-as-you-go, but we will review that annually. And what we'll review, just like we did for the 5-year review, is how much do we have in available funds, what's the project demand over the last few years, what are land cost forecasts, and what are interest rates for borrowing. So that's how they made that decision, just to continue with pay-as-you-go. The next one is impervious surfaces. Currently, most of our conservation easement projects do include an impervious surface limit on all of their properties. We don't have anything like that currently for fee simple projects. So after working with the board, they decided that we should implement that. It would ensure some level of protection on the conservation values of each property. And you can see the chart down below. This would apply only to fee simple, non-active, non-corridor projects. So we're talking really about more passive green space parks. And essentially, the larger the parcel gets, the smaller the percentage is allowed for impervious surfaces. We started at 0.06 acres for the very smallest parklets or neighborhood parks, because we felt that was the amount that was needed to be able to pave ADA spaces, ADA access, and for a restroom to be placed on the property. So that was our starting point. Sorry. Applicants would have the ability to request either a larger or smaller impervious surface limit and make that case to you all should they so choose. But this would just ensure that every piece of property that's Greenbelt funded, that's fee simple, non-active, non-corridor, would have some limitation on it. And it would give the applicant a little more flexibility down the road when they're deciding what types of improvements they want to make.
I have a quick, Eric, may I ask? Mr. Davis, thank you so much. On this one, do you know how a drainage basin would be treated in terms of the pervious surface? In other words, the one we bought at the end of Howell, would that be impacted? Because most of that is already a water body.
So there's a note right down there at the very bottom that's kind of tough to see, but we would
Open water
subtract any open water features. So assuming that that's holding water all the time, that would not count towards the total acreage.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that you had read your slide.
Thank you.
He passed.
He passed.
Any further questions? Mr. Moody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Davis, this impervious surface, I'm thinking back to a project that Councilman Middleton and I championed at Church Creek, that project with the St. Andrews PSD. Now, that's 4.5 acres of nasty,
Yes,
solid
sir.
stuff that's been there that it seems to me that would run into trouble under these, but we're actually doing a positive thing to Church Creek area by ripping up that 50-year-old nasty stuff and putting better stuff down. How would a project like that be impacted by this?
So a project like that, assuming there were already lots of impervious surfaces there, those would count towards their overall limit.
So, okay, so a project like that, Church Creek probably would not do well with this.
Well, Church Creek, actually, they have a requirement in their grant agreement to remove all of the old
Yes.
asphalt and concrete prior to
That-
getting
something like
their
that would be
CO for
taken
the
into
fire station.
consideration? Something
Sir.
like that would be taken into consideration?
Yes, sir. This would just ensure that there's some impervious surface limit. And again, when they're going through the process, this would only be for projects going forward. It would not be retroactive to those projects.
No, I understand that, but I mean, there could be other projects in other districts that are
Yes, sir.
nasty pieces of land like that a Greenbelt project could really improve it, but if it scores poorly because of its current condition, that would be a concern of mine.
Yes, sir. It wouldn't apply to the scoring. It would just be that the impervious surfaces that are there would count towards any standard cap, and they would be able to request variances from that as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you.
Next grouping that I have for you are recommendations from the GAB that would require ordinance changes and require 3 readings. We would work with legal on those and bring those back to you at a later date. First is public support criteria. Really, all of these are minor changes, just tidying up our ordinance. The public support criteria just changes an other section. We never got anything for other when folks submitted applications, so we cleaned that up a little bit. Funding and leveraging criteria, that under the current plan, there was a big jump between 25% and 75%. So a project that had 25% or 74 got the same amount of points. So we just made that curve a little more steady there. The progression with the percentages and the points is more in line. And then you'll probably recall from last fall, there are a couple of sections in the ordinance that require both a 2/3 GAB approval and county council approval to be able to approve use changes on Greenbelt properties. And that's not in line with their advisory capacity and other advisory boards. So the recommendation was just to change that to the GAB approves it and votes on a recommendation for county council. This is our 3rd section that the GAB discussed, but did not make any recommendation for action to county council. Forward spending, something that we've discussed several times that folks are concerned about to some degree, and that is when an individual allocation they use more than the funding that they have, and they borrow essentially from other allocations. And the concern is that in the future, maybe there may be projects that come through and the funds aren't there to be able to fund those. So the GAB did come up with a policy that's listed. The major points are listed on the slide. They said they would like to test that out for a year and see how it would be implemented on the projects that come through, just to make sure there's no bugs that need to be worked out there. So we plan to bring that back to you in about a year.
Mr. Sass.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, how did you guys arrive at that 10% number? Is that just a dart at the board, or is that, I mean, it seems to me maybe 5% or something lower might be if you're talking about a 30 million, or our municipalities have $25 to $30 million in allocations, 10% is still a pretty
That's
good chunk
correct.
of money. I'd be interested to know how you got to 10%.
So I believe the 3 larger municipalities have somewhere around 30 million in their lifetime balance. So obviously that would be $3 million. We started with 5%, and then some of the representatives from the municipalities pushed back a little and requested that to be
They
raised.
probably wanted 20%.
Raised up to 10%, and then that brought them on board.
Fair
Yes,
enough.
sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Urban unincorporated, you know that's forward spent. They did discuss this, and projects that have come up recently in the urban unincorporated area, we've had the adjacent municipalities step in and allow some of their funding to be used for those projects. But as it is now, that will be in the negative for about another 7 or 8 years without any additional funding. The small landowner program, that started with about $1.2 million. And there's now a dwindling balance of about $79,000 in there. That was originally funded through the rural application and can be used in both the urban and the rural areas. Noncompliance enforcement, we thought perhaps that we might be able to issue citations similar to code enforcement, but legal's advised us that we're not set up to do that. And then we discussed use and improvement changes after award. We do have a way to deal with that in the ordinance, and that's in a grant agreement amendment. But staff will continue to gather more comprehensive use and improvement info during the application phase so that we can capture that into the grant agreement and help those applicants think about anything they may want to do on their property going forward. And those impervious surface caps will give them some flexibility, as previously mentioned as well. We discussed park development and public access deadlines. We've got plenty of projects that were purchased years ago and not yet open to the public. We thought about some standard policy that could be implemented to all projects similar to the impervious surfaces, but determined that they're all so unique that we'd continue to address those on a case-by-case basis and pay very close attention to those projects that are offering their future improvements as matching funds. That's it.
Any further questions, Mr. Davis? Mr. Kaprowski?
I just have one with the non-compliance. Certainly, there's a procedure for you to let the county council know then, so that.
We do
you
have a
feel
procedure, and it's once we monitor a property, we give them 30 days, go back out and inspect, and I believe they get another 30 days. If it's not quite finished, then we work it through the GAB and then up to county council at that point. And then the council, of course, could direct legal to step in and take action. Yes,
All I
sir.
meant is to clarify that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Davis, I'd like to add, I do have one question. At the beginning of your presentation, you talked about, did you say we had conserved 40,000 acres? Is that what you said? So we've made that goal, and we're still in the program. And I just think that's incredible that we've done that. It was a great goal. And,
Yes, sir. That's the overall goal, and that 40,000 does include partner lands that were conserved up to 2017. With the last 5-year update, we did another inventory countywide to determine what that figure was.
Well, that's great. I know we're gonna continue that and add to that total. So thank you very much. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Number 6, community development items. 6A, home ARP allocation plan. Request to approve. Is there a motion?
Go ahead.
Sure.
After you, sir, and then I'll state what I had.
I was going to move to approve. I did have a question on it, but I'd move to approve.
Okay,
Second it, and then I'll state my questions.
okay, moved and seconded. Yes, sir, your first question.
So, and thank you, Mr. Durant. I just, we recently obviously went through the gap financing on the $10.2 million, and I'd commented how pleased I was to see the sort of per unit breakdown of investments. Obviously, this is much higher. If you break down 2.9 million by an estimated 14 units, that's a much higher ratio. I think I know why that would be, but I just wanted to see if you could speak to that and maybe have some explanation so we kind of understand what we're targeting here versus in that particular project.
Sure. Let's see, I'm going to make this succinct. This is under HUD, first of all, so there are different regulations regarding how we administer rental rehab. When we put the RFA out on the street, we will have organizations, just like we did with gap financing, apply. This is an estimate. It very well could come in if they have a lot of layered financing. There's nothing to say it wouldn't end up being something like gap financing. What we don't really know yet is some of our smaller nonprofits and developers that we work with HUD, because they're more restrictive regulations, don't often have as much layered financing. Sometimes the HUD projects tend to, per unit, cost a little bit more.
That's certainly informative. My actual instinct was that this was a little bit more of a homelessness targeted project, and thus you would expect deeper subsidies. But is that an aspect of it as well?
So part of the community engagement and gap analysis, when they looked at this population, the hope was initially that we could do wraparound services, but it was obviously cost prohibitive. So as we bring the experts to the table to tell us how they will do that, we will obviously be bringing that back to council for a final vote. So I don't want to preempt what we don't know that the experts could possibly bring to us.
Fair enough. Like I said, I'm comfortable with it. Just for the record, I just wanted to get a little bit more information. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Pryor?
A couple of things, Mr. Durant. So how long will this process take? Because, when this hits the news, people are going to be calling, wanting to know how long it's going to take. How can they apply immediately? So
Sure.
Is it a timetable when you will have this up and ready?
We have to submit this plan to HUD by the end of the month. They have to then review it.
Yes, ma'am.
And then once they approve it or make any requested changes to it, it will come back to us. We'll do what's called a substantial amendment to our plan. And then we'll begin the process of doing the RFA to get nonprofits and developers to the table. We do this already with our HUD funds all the time, so we don't have to write a whole bunch of RFA language that we had to do for the other money. So am I fair in saying this is a simpler process for us as we go forward with the RFA? Yeah, I think so. We have until 2030 to spend it. So we have until 2030 to spend it. It does not have the same timelines that the ARPA does, because this is under HUD.
Okay, as long as when they call, you can explain it.
Absolutely.
There's no certain time. It could be a year, it could be 6 months. Yeah,
Yes,
something
sir.
like that.
We
Okay,
got
so
it.
that'll keep them from bothering y'all as well as bothering us.
Yes, sir. Just send them to us. We'll handle it.
Okay, all right. And Mr. Chairman, and I know one more thing I wanted to ask you. Last week we discussed that age limit from 62 to 80. Well, when I read that, that was actually for the program Mr. Darby established in Liberty Hill for the $500,000. It wasn't for the initial program that we had. I think it was like $3 million, I think?
$3 million.
$3 million. So I wanted to bring that to council's attention, that $500,000 that we awarded to Liberty Hill, that's when the age was changed. I think Mr. Darby asked that it be moved up to 80 to help the elderly. But our current $3 million, I believe, is still 62 and above. Is that right?
Can I offer a little point of clarification? There's a lot of yeses in that. The Liberty Hill money is part of the $3 million. So you all approved a critical home repair program for $3 million. We called it 1A at Mr. Darby's request to get some money specifically to Liberty Hill for the $500,000. Since Liberty Hill had a smaller applicant pool, they did not have the demand of applications that we did when we opened it countywide. So they are able, basically, they think they're going to be able to serve a lot of the people that have come to them for roof and handicap accessibility. For us, and this is just a full answer. I know sometimes y'all wish I wouldn't, but the 1,100 people or so that applied for the critical home repair, the 62-year-olds were not cut out. The priority was just for the more elderly, but they are still very much in the queue. What we anticipate at some point is coming back to you all once we've spent all the money and tell you how many people we still have in the queue. And we might have a better sense, because this was a pilot program, remember? We didn't know what we were going to get. We would come back potentially and ask for more money, should council approve that, and then we can serve the remainder of the people in the queue if they're eligible. So it's a yes and no answer right now, but the goal would be, should council agree to appropriate more money once this is gone, we will continue to serve everyone that's in the queue, all the ones that applied while it was open.
My question is, that lady that came in the other day, I think she was under the age of 80.
Correct.
Her home was in critical need of repair. So that puts her at a disadvantage if we move the age, and she said she was one of the first or so to fill out her application. So what I don't want is for us to, say we're gonna take care of a certain group and, the other one. So I would like to here's what I'd like to see, and I don't know how this would work, but we got 9 council districts. I'd like to see that money divided in, in a certain amount for each district. And then that way, everybody on council in their district that needs repair would be able to utilize, according to the applications, to help those folks in their district. Now, some may not need. Mr. Sass here, well, not Mr. Sass, Mr. Kabrowski is in a more affluent area, because what he covers, but he may need some too. But I'm just saying, I'd like to see that, and I'd like council to discuss that, because I think that way my constituents would benefit for those who apply.
There is nothing under the regulations that would prohibit that, should council agree to do it that way.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, that's something I'd like to put on the agenda for us to discuss. So that way, the rural area, the urban and the city, all of them can be benefited from this instead of just one age group.
Well, let's talk with staff and work on that, and we'll bring it back to council.
Yeah, that's fine. Let staff work it out and bring it up. We can divide the money by districts, and then that way, they can pull a pool of applicants out of each district. And then when that money is used up, then there's no more unless we allocate, more down the line.
All right, let's see if we can work that out.
Does everybody understand what I'm trying to say? Because I think it would be equally divided, and all the constituents can say they participated in the program.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to craft that. I want staff to.
No, I'm not asking us to do that. I'm asking
Yeah.
staff to just bring it back. I mean, we'll have to vote to break the money up into 9, different districts, which we can do.
All right, sir.
And for clarification, that would be with the remaining money out of the
Yeah,
$3 million.
out of the $3 million.
Since we've spent about 2 of that. We have about 700,000 remaining out of the 3 million. So it would be the balance, unless you wanted us to bring back additional funding.
Yeah, so how much do we have left that we can? I think we do have some more ARPA money left, right?
You could reappropriate from
Okay.
another category. Yes, sir.
Well, I think if y'all get the programs in place, and then if we want to reallocate, we can tell you how to, to
Yes, sir.
reallocate. But I just want to make sure we got a program in place to benefit each district.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Could you remind me how many people, we had like 1,100 applications?
Almost 1,100, 1,093 or something like that applied.
And can you remind me, I know I got a blue sheet on it, but can you tell me how many people we've helped?
I'm going to need help with that one. I know you just updated all the numbers. Can you? If not, we can get it back to you by Tuesday. Okay, we just got some more projects done, so let us get back to you on Tuesday if we could.
That's great.
And Ms. Durant, if y'all can break it down by districts on how
Sure,
the money was spent.
absolutely.
That would be a lot of help too, what we
Okay.
spent, what we have, that break it down by district for.
Absolutely. Will do.
Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Moody?
Thank you, Mr. Sass. Mr. Durant, on the yellow sheet, you talk about outcomes, depending on the type of projects and supplemental funding organizations bring to the table. Is that federal money? Is it money from local organizations? I mean, to piggyback on Mr. Werman's question, that's a lot per unit, but as additional dollars come in, that gives us some more bang for the buck. So
does.
What sort of sources, not holding you to anything, but what sort of sources do you guys anticipate coming in to supplement what we're doing?
Well, to be honest with you, when we're dealing with HUD money, it's a little different because you can't match HUD money with other federal money. Whereas with the Treasury money, we can match Treasury money with other federal money. So one of the things we'll have to do is evaluate as part of our scoring mechanism when we get the applications, how much weight we apply. Bless you. To essentially match what you're familiar with, like the way we look at it with Greenbelt. It's a similar, it will follow a very similar model to what we do with Greenbelt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. 6B, Just Home Project Housing Investment Action Plan, request to approve.
We just voted on both of them.
We voted on both of them?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We did
Excuse me. Thank you very much. 7A, Sheriff's Office Competitive Pay Funding. Mr. Boykin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This time I'd like to move to approve transfers within the FY 2023 budget up to $3.8 million on an ongoing basis as needed, as requested by the sheriff in support of the proposed competitive pay plan to be used to cover any deficits in the event the sheriff spends the entire allocation of her FY 2023 budget.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. This concludes our Finance Committee meeting for March 16th. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow, maybe, I hope.
Y'all have a good one. Yes, sir. We'll miss y'all tomorrow.
Not coming tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make it tomorrow, so I won't be able to get on Tuesday.